What's going on, everybody? It's your boy KRYPTONIAN SAIYAN here, bringing you guys another Chainsaw Man chapter review for Chainsaw Man chapter 119. And now that chapter 119 is done in the books, we got a lot to discuss because not only did Fujimoto have Nayuta and Yoru meet, but it looks as if Nayuta has attacked Yoru by using those chains that we see the Control Devil use. If this doesn't lead to Yoru realizing that Nayuta is the reborn Control Devil, then I don't know what else will. However, let's back things up a bit and let's get into the review of the chapter so we can unpack everything that Fujimoto just dropped into our laps. So the chapter opens up picking up exactly where the last one left off, where Denji's taking Mitaka home with him and he starts laying out all the different ground rules while there. And at first you can't help but think that maybe these rules, they're just pretty standard stuff, like don't open the doors to any other apartment other than Denji's, or not opening the fridge. Things like that are just polite. And Mitaka even says that these are just standard things. Now the refrigerator one, that's a little odd if that applies to Denji, but Fujimoto then makes you think for a moment, maybe this is just Denji without any proper house training because he did pretty much raise himself. So maybe Nayuta had to lay down some ground rules, like what you need to do when you have guests over, even though Denji did live with Aki and power back during the happier days of Chainsaw Man. However, as Denji and Mitaka are enjoying the movie, we get more foreshadowing that Nayuta is going to be a problem, and it's actually the first time in part 2 of Chainsaw Man that we see her full body. Previously, we'd only seen her when Denji was asleep at night, when Yuko got killed by the fake Chainsaw Man, where we see the top of her head when Denji is asleep, but this time we see her walking a pack of dogs, and Denji is warning Mitaka that Nayuta is a bit of a problem child. Fujimoto then takes things a step further by having comedic moments where it's meant to distract us from the coming calamity that's known as Nayuta by having Denji show off that riz of his by saying, Mitaka, don't make out in front of me in front of Nayuta, and we see Mitaka revert back to her default factory settings by throwing a jab at Denji, first by saying she can't believe that Denji thinks that she likes him, to saying that she hates him, all while sweating nervously and blushing like crazy. Mitaka saying one thing, but we can obviously tell that's not exactly the truth. This leads to Mitaka once again lowering her guard to Denji, where she lets it slip that she doesn't want Denji to die, and she's in the same boat as him where she has rules that she has to obey or she too will die, and she even goes as far as to warn Denji to stay away from her. However, Denji, being the guy that he is, he takes interest not in a girl who he thinks is cute, saying that she has rules she has to obey or else she'll die, but instead this man's more so focused on trying to figure out what it is he did wrong that turned off Mitaka. In short, Denji, the horny powers are starting to creep in. He's replaying the events of the date that he had with Mitaka in his head, and he's even wondering if maybe he does actually smell like wet dog, and if that's the reason why Mitaka doesn't like him, going so far as to even ask her if dogs smell bad, which leads to Yoru taking over Mitaka's body and kissing Denji, which is very interesting timing on her part. Yoru and Mitaka, they're connected, so they share brains. Yoru knows that Mitaka does like Denji. However, she also knows she has to seduce Denji in order to turn him into a weapon, and she just happened to kiss him at the moment where Denji's emotions were on a scale from 1 to 10, a full-blown 10, while he was trying to figure out everything about Mitaka. We see Yoru with her hand on Denji's head, and I think in this moment Yoru was about to turn Denji into a weapon, but then we get that shot of Nayuta standing in that doorway, and Jesus, for a moment when you see that silhouette, she looks exactly like Makima. From the way her hair's on her shoulder to the lashes on her hip that are used to control the dogs, Fujimoto clearly took inspiration from one of Makima's most iconic moments where she had everyone in chains during the Control Devil arc, and he clearly used it as the final obscure shot of Nayuta before we see her in all of her glory. Whereas the first time we see her in the chapter, we can't make out the features of her, and there's darker shading while she's walking the dogs. In this shot, we can't see anything because there's all white around her during this time because the light is coming in, which I think Fujimoto might be foreshadowing there's something here more to Nayuta. Allow me to explain. So she's definitely being teased as being another mini Makima potentially, but the choice of contrast between the light and the dark in both of those shots, combined with the fact that when we first see her when Yuko dies and Nayuta is asleep on top of Denji, I think that crazy Baka Fujimoto might be using imagery to hint at the fact that her true nature is still asleep. She can go either to the light or she can go to the dark. Good God, this is brilliant if this ends up being true. The chapter ends off with Nayuta calling Yoru a thief, and we see those chains burst on her fingers, and it goes right through Yoru's head, which in my opinion pretty much confirms my suspicion. Yoru was in the process of trying to place Denji under her control as a weapon, and Nayuta stepped in to prevent this from happening. She used the word thief. The word thief implies that she was trying to take something that belonged to Nayuta, and that was obviously Denji. The other thing that stands out about this chapter is the line about not opening up any doors other than his own. One of the big moments from Chainsaw Man Part 1 was Pochita telling Denji not to open up the door, and Makima making Denji open up the door before she killed Power right in front of Denji. In Chainsaw Man Part 2, we've seen Mitaka in her subconscious walking in an alley. Chances are there's some type of a door in there as well, whether it be symbolically or whether it be literally, but this isn't by mistake that line is dropped in there. I think there's a double meaning to it. I don't say this lightly because anyone who's familiar with my One Piece journey, you know that I love One Piece, but Fujimoto low-key is starting to be a miniature Oda with the way that he foreshadows stuff, and when you add in his tendency to subvert our expectations as readers, you got a lot of things coming here. Next, we have Denji being used for comedic relief by him telling Mitaka not to make out with him in front of Nayuta, which accomplished the goal of simultaneously making us laugh while also setting up the groundwork for the plot twist at the end of the chapter and potentially the jealousy issues with Nayuta. Now, don't get me wrong, so let me clarify so nobody gets the wrong idea. I don't want the FBI showing up thinking that I'm saying Denji has a child hooked onto him. What I am saying is that jealousy and control, these are emotions that go hand in hand, and she is the reincarnated control devil, and Denji saying something like that could mean that Nayuta values the attention from Denji. We can see it in their room because you got flowers with their names written on them, you got Nayuta's school backpack in the background, you got what look like our toys on the ground, you have a literal fart counter on there, and I think all this is being shown to highlight the light and darkness of Nayuta, which goes back to what Kishibe said at the end of Part 1 of Chainsaw Man. Denji was being given Nayuta to prevent her from turning into another Makima. However, this chapter, if it doesn't give you PTSD from Makima in Part 1, I think I might just need to go speak to a shrink or something, because I certainly got those vibes. Seriously, all the signs are there when you look at it. Like how Denji's flower is healthy and is growing towards the light, whereas Nayuta's is withering, but there's still some healthy parts of the flower left behind that is reaching for the light itself. I've always been a firm believer that a person's room can tell you a lot about them, and what we have here in that apartment is enough that it can literally be its own video for a breakdown, especially once we get more information on the dynamic between Denji and Nayuta and how we see Nayuta's character arc and where it ends up going. Now, this brings us to the Yoru and Nayuta dynamic. I've been waiting for a while now to see these two interact, and what happens next is going to be very telling. If this is some kind of energy chain that Nayuta shoots out and it's not physical, then it's going to be something that, while it doesn't do physical harm to Mitaka's body, Yoru is likely going to know right away that something's wrong with Nayuta. If it is literally a chain that goes through her skull and Denji sees Yoru get up like it's nothing, God, the amount of questions we're going to see this man ask, they're going to be plentiful. And the room for potential plot twists has me feeling that same PTSD I once did once we got past the Darkness Devil battle, where it finally sank in on me that for as crazy as Chainsaw Man's story is, it was about to get even wilder and even weirder. There's also one other thing that's bugging me, and it might just be because while I love Makima's character, I think there's a lot of complexity to the character. I'd be lying if I said she didn't do a number on me when I first read Chainsaw Man. When we meet Nayuta, we see that she's got some of Makima's tendencies, and even her bite was very similar because Denji recognized it right away. I'm wondering if the samsara cycle of life, death, and rebirth that devils undergo, if it isn't slightly different for the Four Horsemen, because I'm really starting to believe Nayuta might have some of her memories from her life when she was Makima, or at the very least, her reincarnated body has some sort of memory muscle memory, if that makes sense. I really think Fujimoto hit one out the park with this chapter because he's got room to subvert our expectations at the start of the next chapter, because literally anything can happen given how it ended off, and it's something that I love because you don't know what you're going to get with each chapter, but what you do know is that when you read closely, you start seeing nuggets of small stuff that's crammed into the chapter that make you appreciate the fact that this is a mangaka handling this series with a lot of great care, and the amount of details in the chapters, like the ones we have right here, has Fujimoto running up my list of favorite mangaka. He'd have to fumble Chainsaw Man as badly as Tokyo Revenge's final arc was for me to feel otherwise. That being said, I'm curious us know you guys' thoughts about what's next. Does Nayuta actually have Makima's memories, or was this merely by chance she's behaving in the way she is? While you think that over, click here to watch my other Chainsaw Man video you see on the screen right now.